Hi, my name is Christine Blauvelt, and I'm the co-founder of Duma. Duma basically provides small businesses in Kenya with recruiting tools to help them find the right people, and then based on the screening tests that we run with job candidates, we also give job candidates feedback on how to improve their professional profile and increase their chances of getting a job. When I started at Princeton, I definitely had no idea that I was going to be starting a company. I actually came in very much a bio major. I had the only experience I really had was doing lab research, and my parents were both kind of science engineers, and so I thought that was the path I was going down. And I always kind of knew that I wanted to do medical school, but I had no idea that I was going to do entrepreneurship. And it really wasn't until my senior year that I even was exposed to entrepreneurship at all. And to be honest, I actually thought that businesses were probably like a little bit dirty, and that whole sphere was something that I didn't want to be involved in as much. And I actually was more with nonprofits and global health type work in that. And then it wasn't until senior year when Arielle and I both were in the same social entrepreneurship class together that I started to really see more of the startup side and got really interested in technology and sort of fusing those technology elements together with social issues to address the issues that I was already interested in. Yeah, so we were both in Professor Danner's class, Ventures to Address Global Challenges, in our senior year fall. So Ariel and I, we were both in Kenya the summer before our senior year for our senior thesis research. And we got back to Princeton, we met up, and we decided pretty early on that we wanted to go back to Kenya. And it really started out more as a project. We wanted to go back for 1 year. We were applying for fellowships, and we had this idea that we wanted to work with unemployment. The fact that we were in the class together, I think, really shaped the fact that we moved more and more away from a project and more towards a sustainable business. And so I think, at least for me, because I had had no exposure to entrepreneurship, I definitely would not have pursued a company had I not been in the class, because it just gave me a context to work towards that that I didn't have before. It came mainly from our experiences in Kenya that summer. So the basic idea came from that. I came from a very strong health interest background, and Ariel was interested in creative arts and theater and history. And so those two fields seem like they're pretty far apart. But unemployment was something that we both were very interested in, and we had both observed pretty strongly when we were there for a couple of months over the summer. And so I think we decided pretty early on, after deciding that we wanted to work together, that we wanted to work within unemployment. And so the basic idea came a lot just from the people that we had talked to there, follow-up conversations, some basic research. And the basic idea was that we wanted to create a social network around hiring that was accessible via basic text messaging. Of course, the idea has evolved a lot since then, based on the time that we've been there and everything that we've learned about how the job market actually works in Kenya. But the basic idea was just from our shared interests and what we had observed when we were in Kenya together for our thesis research. So Arielle and I did Princeton Elab the summer after we graduated, along with Eric Kuto and Luke Paulson. Eric was our first chief technology officer. So he's from Kenya and was a computer science major. And Luke had just finished his sophomore year in computer science when he joined the eLab with us. The eLab was a really great time for us to all be together. We had worked a lot on the company throughout our senior year. A lot of it was sort of idea building. So we were building contacts. We were sort of making decisions about what we wanted the company to look like. We did a little bit of fundraising with small grants and competitions, and the eLab was really a good time for us to build our minimum viable product. So we had our developers there helping us out, building something that we could bring to Kenya. And for the whole team, it was a good time to really solidify a lot of our ideas and to make plans for our big move to Kenya. Because there were a lot of things to plan. It was just little things even. Like we had to find a place to stay. We had to find people that we were going to hire there. We had to build partnerships with people on the ground, and we were trying to get advisors and potential investors on board. So even though we had a lot of time during our senior year, it was a really good time for us to just be focused on Duma and all be in the same place, which is hard to achieve. And they gave us a space to do that, and they gave us a stipend that we weren't blowing through our startup budget in the first couple of months. Networking is something that you do all throughout, and it's something that I'm still doing, even though I'm in medical school. There's a word for it called networking, but I think it's more about the way you just interact with people and about being passionate about the idea that you're working on. It's amazing, like your social life and your work life kind of blend together when you're in a startup. And it's not in a way, though, it's not in a way that's bad. It's not in a way like I can't get away from my work. It's in a way that the things that I'm doing right now are really important, and I find them really fun, and you just talk about them to the people that you're with. I think the key people that have been part of Duma are generally people that we met in a more casual environment when we're just talking to them about what we do, and there's some overlap with what they do, and they end up being really key people either for mentoring or for investing or even for joining the company. So we've gotten funding from a blend of angel investors and grants. Early on, most of our funding came from competitions. So when we were seniors, we applied to Tiger Launch at Princeton. We applied to some small Ashoka grants. And so we had, and a little bit of donations, but we basically got about $10,000 before we went to Kenya. And because it's not as expensive in Kenya, we haven't had to raise as much money as some people, so that was definitely enough for us. And then as we went along, we raised a seed round from angel investors that we closed in February of 2013, so that was about 6 months into us being in Kenya. So that was our first major funding, and that was from angel investors that were a blend of, basically there were people who were in the States but had some experience in Africa, and people that we had met before we left for Kenya. So we closed our first round, and then recently in November, or I guess about a year ago now, in November of last year, we won $100,000 in a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. And so our funding's been a bit of a mix. I think we're moving more and more, though, towards investor funding. In the initial stages, grant funding is wonderful because you get small bits of money. You don't have to worry so much about building a strong team of investors, and you don't give away equity early on. So I would definitely say that the competitions that you can apply for early on are really helpful, both in terms of not giving equity away and in terms of getting some concrete support for the idea, because you can say that you won a competition, and also for helping you develop your own idea, because you're forced to answer a lot of questions when you apply for competitions, and that really does help you think about the core aspects of the company that are important. But as you go more and more along, what we found is that investors that can be both advisors and investors are incredibly important. Building a team of mentors that will support you both financially and strategically, and sometimes even emotionally as you're building your business. When we're looking for investors to sort of join Duma with us, we look for people that generally have an understanding of our industry. So for a lot of startups, that could be the issue you're trying to solve. So for us, you might think that the industry is recruiting, but I think that what we found is actually the biggest barrier to entry is just the market. So we really try to look for investors that have had some experience in Africa, so that they understand the context in which we're working. But it doesn't really matter what your business is. I think it's just important to identify what core knowledge you want your investors to have, and that they can support you on that, and they can understand what it is that you're trying to achieve and help you do that. So what we really try to look for is investors that have had experience in Africa, and our investors have come mainly from networking, actually, almost entirely from networking. We've used some of the online platforms, but more as supportive platforms to build general public awareness about what we're doing. So one of our key investors, we actually met when we were at Princeton at Startup Weekend. So we did a Startup Weekend like a week after we came up with the idea for Duma, and we met Ikram, who is the co-founder of Venmo, and he became very quickly one of our closest mentors. He was at Startup Weekend with Venmo as a mentor and just stayed with us for the whole weekend, helping us build our first mini prototype of Duma. We stayed in contact with him, and he actually, so he grew up in Zimbabwe, so he had a definite interest in what we were doing, and a definite understanding of the market. And so we stayed in contact with him, and then he joined on our first seed round. One of our other investors is actually a Princeton PhD candidate who was working at the World Bank in Nairobi. So we met him while we were there, not even looking for investment from him, kind of connecting with the Princeton alumni community there and trying to sort of learn more from his experiences in Kenya and in Uganda and Tanzania. And he ended up being, again, like a good mentor and joined on our seed round. So I think that's really the way that to raise money. There's definitely a time when you are focusing more of your efforts on raising money, but the people that you raise money from are people that you have built a more long-term relationship with, generally. Our culture is very fun. It's very relaxed and it's very open. I think we knew that we were going to be putting in a lot of our energy and a lot of our life into Duma, and we really worked hard to build the sort of culture that we had seen at other startups while we were here and thought was a really nice place to work. So I mean, we have the sort of standard startup like bean bags and happy hours and all of those things that make it fun to work there. I think it's been a bigger influence. It's been a much stronger influence on it because we're in Kenya and because that is really not traditional. So our employees love working at Duma because it's just that sort of culture doesn't exist there. It's generally a very formal, very professional work environment. People will sometimes have to go to work in suits, and we don't care. Like, everybody shows up in t-shirts and people show up whenever they want. They work. Everybody works the same number of hours, but there's no 9 to 5 culture where you have to be there at a certain hour and everybody leaves after that hour. And it's, I mean, we have team meetings, we have team bonding events, we go hiking together. There's a lot of a very fun environment. And I think that building a playful and supportive environment within the office is really important when you're running a startup. It's a fine balance between establishing that it's a professional environment and people are expected to work very hard, and keeping it lighthearted, keeping it fun. Arielle and I are co-CEOs, and that's worked out really, really well for us. When we started the company, there was definitely, we didn't want to set a hierarchy from the start. I think it's really important as co-CEOs to learn about each other's strengths, to learn about your different strengths, and to sort of build a respectful environment within that. Having a co-founder has been, I think, for us, one of the most important things for helping the startup succeed. Because it's really hard. It's really hard, and you have to have someone there who is your equal, who you can bounce ideas off of, who you can get support from when you're really upset. And if one of us is having an off day, like, the other person can take over more of the management of the rest of the office. And it's really nice having someone else who can be your partner in running a startup. So we've found it, I mean, I think generally having someone to bounce ideas off of and to support each other has been incredibly helpful with running the startup. And then in terms of sort of co-CEOs, we've broken apart our tasks into the things that we know that the other person is good at and we know that we're good at. And so it's a really good division of labor in that way. And Arielle and I are really different in our strengths. She's extremely artistic, and I'm more like the sciencey research type of personality, and so that works really well together. Sometimes it's little things, like Arielle's an amazing writer, but she hates editing, and so I edit everything because I love editing, and I love when things are formatted perfectly and there's no spelling or grammar mistakes there. So it's an interesting and really productive dynamic. Honestly, like, having a co-founder is like one of the best things that you can do, I think. I think having that support is so important. So I would highly recommend. Also, because then you have someone to bounce ideas off of. Then you have someone who's, it's not just you, and it's really intimidating making decisions in a startup. So having a co-founder who you can say, like, is this the right thing to do? Is this not the right thing to do? Why do we think it's this way? Is really, really important. there are many challenges that we've faced along the way. I think challenges are always much more challenging when you're looking back. So the first 6 months for us was really, really challenging. We were thrown into a new country. We didn't really know anybody there. Neither of us had ever run a company before, and we didn't have any of our software developers in Kenya, which is really, really hard, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody running a startup. I think if you're running a tech startup, you really need to have developers there supporting you. But it was really, really hard in the beginning. But it's not like we ever thought it wasn't going to work. It was just that there were a lot of things that we needed to learn how to do. Because when you're in the early stages of a startup, it's usually only you and your co-founder, and you don't have a strong team to support you, and you realize that you kind of have to do everything. And so that was really hard. Like we had to learn. The beginning, like I had to learn how to code, which was hard. I had to learn how to do like our web design, and I had to learn enough about back-end coding to be able to communicate with our developers who were in the States on a totally different time zone. But I had to learn enough about what we were building and to give feedback to them about what we needed to have built and about the progress of those features. And so that was really hard, and I had to learn accounting, and we had to actually learn a new language. So it was like a coding language and Swahili. So that whole adjustment was really hard. I think since then things have gotten a lot easier, but we still have to make hard decisions. So there are always challenges when you're making decisions and you're not sure if it's the right decision, but you have to kind of talk it out with your team and decide this is what we're going to do, this is not what we're going to do, and just go with it. So that's hard. The last thing that I would say is really hard is the first time you have to fire somebody. That was very, very difficult. And I think having Arielle there as a co-founder was extremely helpful with making that easier. But it's really hard to sort of look at your team and you think over and over for weeks, like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Maybe it's my fault that they're not performing well. Maybe I'm not giving feedback to them, and sort of making the decision to fire people because it's so personal, like to have to sit somebody down and have to let them go. So the first time that we had to do that, we've only had to do that twice. We've had to do that twice, which was not only, but we both times are really, really difficult. And having a co-founder there to help you out through that, or not even if you don't want to call it a co-founder, but having someone else on the team who you can talk that decision through, talk to them about that decision, and who you can actually do the firing with is really, really important. I remember the first time that Arielle and I had to fire somebody, like we talked through it for a long time. We planned out what we wanted to say, and then we let the person go, and then we took a really long walk together, and we just walked around town because we knew that like this was somebody who had been with us for from the start and had been with us for almost a year. So it was really, really hard for us to make that decision, but we had each other to go through that, and it was the right decision, but it's really, really hard to do. When we first started Duma, I think there was definitely a point where it wasn't really real, and then there was a point where it was real. So we had talked about this idea, we wanted to do it, and we didn't have any funding until pretty much the end of our senior year. And so Arielle had declined a job, and I wasn't applying for anything else. So there was a point where we really had no other plans for the rest of the year, but we also didn't have any funding to do this, but we were actively working on it. And so when we first started it, I think that there's the company that you're developing, the idea that you're developing becomes more and more real as you're developing it, but I don't think there was ever a part where we thought it was going to fail. I think Arielle and I, maybe this was like a coping mechanism, but we were both kind of like very confidently from the start, like Duma is going to succeed, like it's going to be awesome, and we are awesome, and we're gonna build this company. I think that if you have that sort of attitude, then it definitely, I mean, it makes it a lot easier. there are things that we were not sure we were making the right decision about, but I don't think we ever felt like it was going to fail. One thing that's really nice, though, in an environment like Kenya, is that people are very receptive to new things, and if you make mistakes, they're very forgiving. And so we were running a startup in an environment where people were not really trying to bring us down. Like, people were very interested in what we were doing and very supportive of new ideas, and interested in just trying out what we wanted to do. Especially like people, especially job seekers. I mean, they're interested in, they really, really wanted to get a job, and so they were kind of open to our idea and really wanted to give it a try. And so it's a nice place to work in. I don't think we ever really felt like it was going to fail, fortunately. So we're pretty optimistic. I just got back to the States about a month ago, and I'm just starting medical school at UPenn, but I definitely want to be involved, and we've had a long time to talk about it. So I applied to medical schools 2 years ago, and I deferred for 1 year, and so we've known for a long time that I was going to medical school, and we had a lot of time to plan. We hired somebody who's amazing in Kenya to do a lot of the work I was doing and to be our Chief Technology Officer, our CTO. And so he's been really instrumental in helping that transition, because Arielle has somebody now who's in Kenya who she can bounce ideas off of. And so that's wonderful. But I also definitely want to be involved. I think in this exact moment, I need to find the right balance between schoolwork and Duma. And I'll also be going back to Kenya. So I'll be going back to Kenya Christmas and New Year's, and then I'll be going back next summer. Pursuing an entrepreneurial path has probably been one of the best decisions I've made for a lot of reasons. I think one of the core things that running your own startup teaches you is the things that you're good at and the things that you enjoy doing. And so especially early on in a startup, you kind of have to do everything. You have to, because you can't be hiring people to do different tasks, you have to learn how to do almost every role in the company. And so if you are a computer scientist and you think that you're only going to be coding at a startup, the reality is that you're also going to have to do accounting, you're also going to have to learn marketing, you're going to have to learn customer care, you're going to have to learn how to raise money. And it's a bit overwhelming, but it's also really exciting. And it gives you really good insights into what you enjoy doing, what you're good at doing, and the sort of job that you would want for yourself. So even for people that think that they don't want to be in a startup, I think that being in a startup right after college is a really, really good learning experience, even if you didn't want to do that forever. And then, of course, I think having a co-founder has been a tremendous learning experience for me. It's interesting because I think when you're in school, you sometimes have to work with people on school projects. And so you'll have like short-term projects, and they're usually at most 1 month long, where you'll have to be working intensely one-on-one with one person or with a group of people to make decisions that are sort of what I'll call work-related decisions or school-related decisions. And then you have like friendships and you have relationships, and that teaches you how to emotionally support someone and to be there with them and help them make decisions in their life. But you never really have those two things blended together. I never had that until I had a co-founder, where maybe we had a unique experience where we were really the only ones who were expats when we were first going to Kenya. We were in a smaller community, and so we had each other, and we were both friends and business partners, and that really teaches you how to work with somebody on multiple different levels. And it's a really valuable person to have. It's really valuable to have someone whose opinions you respect and who's also a friend and who you spend time with out sort of, I don't know if you call it outside of work because you're kind of always at work. But it's just having having a small team of people who you work closely with is a really, really good learning experience. Yeah, so a lot of people ask us about our mentors, and I think generally having mentors is extremely important to running the company. But there's one thing that I've learned more recently, and I guess I should have learned it a long time ago because people always say this to us, but it is actually extremely important to hire people on your team who have more experience than you. When we first started out, I think we learned mainly from each other. Arielle and I learned mainly from each other and from our own experiences and failures. And we had mentors that would help us, and you get on Skype with us or got some coffee and sort of talk through the problems. But it wasn't until recently that I learned how important it is to have those people on your team. So the people that are on your team are really going to drive most of the decisions that you choose to make. And having people, even though it's hard in the beginning, so I would say either really, really focus on getting an early team of co-founders or of whatever positions you want to call it, but your early team of people who can really bring more experience than you in something. So whether it's technology or whether it's networking or business development, hire people that have more experience than you. And that might mean giving equity and making those people co-founders. And then once you can and you have enough of a budget, you should hire people who, again, have more experience than you, because what I find is that the mentors that are most valuable are actually your teammates. So it's really, really important to have a strong team that can help the whole company grow. My name is Christine Blauvelt, and I am a Princeton entrepreneur.